All right, so looks like we've got a mountain of stuff about skill-based matchmaking, articles, forum posts, even some handwritten notes. Someone's really digging deep on this one.
Yeah, you guys are going all in on SBMM.
Haha. Well, let's dive in and see what we can uncover, huh?
Sounds good to me.
Now, just to be clear up front, this deep dive is focused on Call of Duty, specifically Black Ops 6 and Warzone.
Oh, interesting choice. That's definitely where the debate around SBMM gets
Yeah,
weeded.
exactly. And that's what we're here for. We see a lot of you struggling with this SBMM paradox,
Ah.
where it's supposed to make games more fun,
Mm-hmm.
but it just ends up causing frustration for many.
Yeah, can't argue with that. It's designed for fairness, theoretically, to match players of similar skill levels, but
But the reality isn't always so peachy.
you got it.
So before we get to the complaints, let's break down how this whole system actually works, what's going on behind the scenes.
Okay, so first thing to remember is it's not just one big gamer score that determines your matches.
Really? So it's not like one number rules them all.
Not quite. Think of it more like different ranking systems working together.
Ah, okay, like different aspects of your gameplay being measured.
Exactly. Some games use something called the ELO system. Others use True Skill or Glicko. They all track your performance in different ways.
So like, how often you win, obviously, but what else?
It goes deeper than that. Think. How decisive your wins or losses are, your kill-death ratio, accuracy, even things like objective play in some games.
Wow, so it's not just about winning or losing, it's how you do it.
You got it. It's like a constant evaluation, not just a final grade at the end of the semester.
Makes sense. But how does that translate to actually finding a match?
Right. So all these rankings, they feed into this matchmaking algorithm.
Oh, the infamous algorithm.
Uh-huh, that's the one. And its job is to pair you up with players who have similar rankings in theory, leading to, you guessed it, balanced matches.
Okay, so it's trying to be fair at least.
At its core, that's the idea. Now, of course, it gets a bit more complicated when you factor in things like team-based games, different game modes.
Yeah, and what about when you're playing with friends who, well, maybe aren't quite at your skill level?
Ah, you're talking about party matchmaking. That's where things can get a little messy.
Messy good or messy bad?
Often messy bad, because the system usually prioritizes the highest skilled player in the group.
So if you're playing with a friend who's like a total pro,
Your matches are going to get a whole lot tougher.
Yeah.
The algorithm tries to find a balance for the whole group, which can lead to some interesting matchups, to say the least.
well, I'm guessing that's where some of the frustration starts to creep in.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Because no system is perfect.
Yeah.
And you're bound to find yourself in matches that feel completely unbalanced or
Or you just end up playing the same small pool of people over and over again.
happens all the time.
Yeah.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to complaints about SBMM.
Right. And we're going to get into all of those complaints, but first, let's take a quick break.
So one of the things that developers are constantly doing is they're tweaking these ranking systems.
Okay, so those ELO, True Skill, all that jazz we talked about before the break.
Exactly. It's not a set it and forget it kind of thing,
Right. So what are they actually changing? Like, what are they looking for?
Oh, all sorts of things. They're looking at data, player feedback, even how long it takes people to find a match. They're always trying to fine-tune things, trying to make that perfect experience for players.
Makes sense. But, it makes me wonder, isn't a perfect skill balance kind of boring?
Yeah.
I mean, part of the fun of gaming is overcoming a challenge, right?
It's definitely a debate in the gaming community, yeah. Some players, they thrive on those consistent, like evenly matched games, but others, they want the chance to dominate,
Yeah.
to feel like they're progressing.
It's like, where's the reward if every match is a nail-biter?
Exactly. So developers have to cater to both types of players, right?
Right. And we mentioned different game modes earlier, but I'm guessing there's more to it than that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We're seeing some games experiment with things like matchmaking ranges.
Okay, matchmaking ranges. What's that all about?
So instead of like rigidly matching you with people with the exact same skill as you,
It gives you a little wiggle room.
exactly. So you might end up with people slightly above or below your skill level. It adds an element of surprise, a little bit of unpredictability.
I kind of like that. It's like you never really know what you're going to get.
Yeah, and it gives players a chance to like punch above their weight sometimes or, have a slightly easier time if they need a break from the hardcore stuff.
That makes sense. But what about all those complaints we hear about, SBMM making casual play way too sweaty? Like, isn't the point of casual to just chill?
It's a real issue, no doubt. Part of the problem is, the definition of casual. It's different for everybody.
Yeah, true. What's casual for one person might be another person's warm-up.
Exactly. So it's tough to design a system that pleases every definition of casual, but there are some things that developers are trying.
Okay, give me the good stuff. What are they trying?
Some games have implemented social playlists, and the idea is to make it less about, competition and more about just having fun, maybe playing with friends.
So no more stressing about those KD ratios.
Ideally, no. These playlists often have more forgiving matchmaking or even no SBMM at all in some cases.
Okay, that sounds pretty nice, actually.
Heh.
But I'm sure there's challenges there too, right?
Of course, if the matchmaking is too loose, you end up with totally unbalanced matches. And that can be frustrating in a whole different way.
Right. No one wants to feel like they're playing against, like, a bunch of bots
Yeah.
or get absolutely destroyed every game.
Exactly. Balance is everything, right? And it's something that developers are constantly tweaking and experimenting with. It's this ongoing process.
So it sounds like there's no easy answer when it comes to casual and SBMM. It's like this ever-evolving beast that developers are constantly trying to tame.
That's a great way to put it, actually. It's not a perfect system, and it probably never will be.
But at least it sounds like developers are aware of the criticisms and trying to improve things.
Definitely. They're listening to feedback, analyzing data, and making adjustments all the time.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
So, if we take a step back and look at the big picture here, I mean, where does SBMM go from here? Is this a fad that's going to fade away, or is this something that's here to stay?
It's hard to say for sure, but I think SBMM in some form, it's probably here to stay.
Because at its core, it's trying to solve a real problem.
You got it. I mean, most players, they just want fair and balanced matches. They don't want to get stomped every game, but they also don't want to be the one doing the stomping all the time either.
So even with its issues, SBM is still the best tool we have for that.
I'd say so, for now at least. But we are seeing some really interesting innovations popping up.
Ooh, like what? Spill the tea. Give us a peek into the future.
Well, one area that I find super exciting is the use of AI in matchmaking.
AI, hold on. How does that even work with matchmaking?
Just imagine a system that can analyze not only your skill level, but also your playstyle, your preferences, maybe even your mood.
Whoa, hold up. A matchmaking system that actually gets me. I mean, that sounds amazing, but also kind of creepy.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit of both. But I really do think we're going to start seeing systems like that in the next few years.
Okay, now that could be a real game changer. But I'm guessing it's like super complicated to actually build something like that, right?
Oh, insanely complicated. But as AI technology keeps getting better and better, it's only a matter of time,
So the future of SBMM might not be about these, like, rigid algorithms that everyone complains about.
Maybe it's about something much more personalized.
Exactly. A system that really understands each player and tries to give them the best possible experience.
It's definitely a dream scenario, and I think it might be closer than we realize.
I'm definitely feeling optimistic about SBM now.
Yeah.
But before we get carried away with all these AI dreams, I think it's important to bring it back down to earth for a sec. What about the challenges developers are facing right now with the systems we actually have?
Okay, back to reality then. What's on your mind?
We've talked a lot about the theory of SBMM, but, I'm curious about the nitty-gritty.
Yeah.
Like, what are the real roadblocks that developers are actually hitting when they're trying to implement these systems?
Oh, tons of them. One of the biggest ones is just the sheer volume of data they have to handle.
Wait, 2 MUCH data. I always thought more data was a good thing.
You'd think, right? But it can actually become a problem. You've got millions of players, and every single one of them is different, right? They have different skill levels, play styles, preferences. Just trying to make sense of all that data and build a system that works for everyone, it's insanely complex.
It's like a giant, constantly changing jigsaw puzzle.
Exactly. And that puzzle keeps changing as new players join, other players quit, and everyone's skills are constantly going up and down. It's a logistical nightmare.
Okay, yeah, I'm starting to see why this is so tricky. But it's not just the data, right?
Nope, not even close. Player perception plays a huge part in all of this, too.
Oh, right. You can build the most technically perfect SBMM system in the world. But if players don't believe it's fair, it's not going to work, right?
100%. And that's where transparency and communication come in.
So developers need to be more open about how SBMM actually works.
Absolutely. If players understand how the system works, why it's making the choices it's making, they're much more likely to trust it.
So it's about taking players behind the curtain a little bit. No more secrets.
Right. And it's not just about like the technical details either. It's also about setting realistic expectations.
Okay, so what does that mean?
Look, even the best SBMM system, it's not going to be perfect. There are always going to be those matches that feel unbalanced. Or you're going to get matched against the same person 2 or 3 times in a row. It happens.
So it's about managing those expectations,
Yeah,
helping players understand that, hey, SBMM is a process. It's not going to be perfect overnight.
exactly. And it's a process that requires constant feedback, constant improvement.
Which brings us back to those frustrated forum posts you sent in. You know, developers need to be open to hearing what players are saying, and they have to be willing to make changes based on that feedback.
For sure. And honestly, we're seeing more and more of that these days, which is encouraging. Developers are doing open betas, they're having discussions on forums, even talking directly to players on social media.
It's all about that dialogue, that collaboration between the people making the games and the people playing them.
Couldn't agree more. Because ultimately, it's the players who decide whether an SBMM system is actually working or not.
So it sounds like the future of SBMM. It all comes down to that ongoing conversation between developers and players.
It really does. That's why it's so important for players to be informed, to understand how this stuff actually works, and to give their feedback in a way that helps developers make things better.
Because at the end of the day, I think everyone wants the same thing, right?
To have a great gaming experience.
Exactly. And if we can work together, I think we can get there. Speaking of getting somewhere, what's interesting? We've talked about SBMM from the perspective of like the casual player. We've talked about it from the developer side. But there's this whole other world of gaming where SBMM matters a lot.
You're talking about esports.
Exactly. The competitive scene. It's funny, right? You'd think with pros, SBMM wouldn't really matter. I mean, they're all at the top of their game.
Yeah, you'd think it'd be more straightforward, just the best playing against the best.
Right. But I'm guessing it's not that simple.
No, not at all. Because in esports, the stakes are way higher. I mean, we're talking huge prize pools, sponsorships, global rankings. Every single match has a huge impact.
So even a tiny skill imbalance could have a ripple effect.
Absolutely. One mismatched player could throw off a whole tournament. You get upsets, controversy, angry fans. It's a mess.
Makes sense. So how does SBMM actually work in esports? Is it the same system they use for us regular folks?
It's similar, but way more nuanced. I mean, they're still trying to match skill levels, but it's also about creating those really exciting, balanced matches that viewers want to see.
So it's not just throwing the top 10 players in a room and seeing what happens.
Haha. No, there's a lot more to it than that. You have to think about things like team synergy, strategic depth, even how different players' styles mesh together.
Okay, so there's like a whole layer of strategy on top of the individual skill stuff.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, esports has to be entertaining to watch.
Oh, for sure. Can't forget about the entertainment factor.
And because those stakes are so high in esports, there's usually a lot more human oversight in the whole SBMM process.
Ah, so it's not just like algorithms making all the decisions.
It's a combo. You'll have committees, analysts, sometimes even the players themselves weighing in to make sure everything is fair and balanced. And fun to watch, of course.
So it's more of a collaboration between people and technology.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
It's kind of wild how SBMM has this impact on both sides, right? You've got the competitive side with esports, and then let's call it the fun side for the rest of us.
And finding that balance between those two sides is something that developers are constantly grappling with.
Well, I've got to say, this has been quite a journey. We started with a pile of messages about SBMM, and now we've covered everything from like the basic algorithms to AI and even esports.
It's been a wild ride, but I think it's safe to say SBMM is way more complicated than most people realize. There are no easy answers, right?
Definitely not. And we've seen that it's not just about making everyone happy. It's about fairness, competition, engagement, and it's different for every type of player.
And it's always changing. I mean, games are evolving, new tech is coming out, players' expectations are changing. It's a lot to keep up with.
It's a big question. Is SBMM good or bad for gaming? What's the final verdict?
I honestly don't think it's as simple as good or bad. It's more like SBMM is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used well or it can be used poorly.
Okay, I like that analogy. So what do we need to do to make sure it's used well?
Well, developers have got to be transparent about how it works. They've got to be responsive to what players are saying, and they got to keep making changes.
And players have got to be informed too, right? Like,
Yeah.
we got to understand the complexities and give feedback that's actually helpful.
Couldn't agree more. It's got to be a collaborative effort to really make SBMM work the way it should.
On that note, I think it's time to wrap up this epic deep dive into the world of skill-based matchmaking. Thanks for sticking with us through all the twists and turns.
It's been a blast.
And everyone listening, we hope you learned something new. Keep those questions coming, and until next time, keep on gaming.